In the ancient history of Israel, a great dream began with a warrior king. It was the dream of building an eternal temple for God, a sacred place where the people could gather to pray and where the Holy Ark of the Covenant could rest. The man who carried that dream was King David. David had united the tribes of Israel, expanded the kingdom, and turned it into a powerful nation in the region. After years of victories and battles, he wanted to dedicate the rest of his life to building a magnificent temple for the Lord. But according to the scriptures, a message came to him. David would not be the one to build that temple. The reason was simple, but strict. David was a warrior. His hands had shed too much blood in war. The temple of God, a symbol of peace and holiness, could not be built by a king whose life had been defined by battle. Instead, the sacred mission would be passed to his son, Solomon. The name Solomon comes from the Hebrew word shalom, meaning peace. Even though he would not build the temple himself, David never abandoned the dream. During the final years of his life, he quietly prepared for what would become the greatest construction project in the history of Israel. He gathered gold, silver, precious stones, and rare timber. Ancient records suggest that the treasure David left behind included about 3,400 tons of gold, along with vast amounts of silver and jewels. If converted into modern value, the total could exceed $590 billion, a number so enormous that even modern megaproject skyscrapers or the International Space Station would seem small by comparison. And when David finally passed away, the dream was handed to Solomon. When Solomon became king, he inherited not only a wealthy kingdom, but also the sacred responsibility left by his father. But Israel had a problem. The kingdom possessed gold, a great deal of gold, yet it lacked some of the most important building materials needed to construct such a temple. Most importantly, it lacked cedar wood from Lebanon, a legendary material in the ancient world known for its durability, fragrance, and resistance to decay. Israel also lacked master craftsmen capable of building a structure of this scale. So Solomon did something extraordinary. He negotiated a historic alliance with King Hiram of Tyre, a powerful maritime kingdom along the Mediterranean coast in what is now modern-day Lebanon. The agreement between the two kings lasted for 20 years. Solomon supplied Tyre with enormous quantities of agricultural goods every year, tens of thousands of tons of wheat, and vast amounts of olive oil, often called the liquid gold of the ancient Middle East. In return, Hiram provided what Israel needed most: towering cedar logs from the mountains of Lebanon, the finest carpenters, highly skilled stonemasons, and master metalworkers. Each cedar tree was cut down in the Lebanese mountains, then transported down rivers to the sea. From there, the logs were floated along the Mediterranean coast until they reached the shores of Israel. It was an enormous supply chain, one of the largest construction logistics operations of the ancient world, a multinational building project, more than 3,000 years before the modern era. To build the temple, Solomon required an enormous workforce. According to ancient records, the total number of laborers involved reached 183,000 people, an astonishing number for that time. Among them were 70,000 workers who carried materials, 80,000 stonecutters working deep inside the quarries, and 3,600 supervisors and overseers managing the massive project. In addition, 30,000 Israelites were recruited to work in Lebanon cutting timber. They served in rotating shifts, 1 month of work, followed by 2 months at home. But not everyone received such treatment. Approximately 150,000 laborers were foreigners descendants of the ancient Canaanite peoples. They were forced into heavy labor inside the stone quarries and construction sites. No rotation shifts, no choice. These were essentially slave laborers. Massive stones were cut from the mountains. Blocks weighing many tons were dragged using ropes, wooden sledges, and primitive pulley systems. Many of these men spent their entire lives in dark quarries, building a temple they would never be allowed to enter. This exploitation quietly planted resentment within the kingdom. And after Solomon's death, those tensions would eventually explode. The once united kingdom of Israel would later split into two separate nations, a political consequence rarely considered when people admire the temple's splendor. During the 7 years of construction, the Temple of Solomon was built under a remarkable and mysterious condition. According to the Bible, no sound of hammer, chisel, or iron tool was heard at the construction site. Why? Because iron, the metal used to forge weapons, symbolized war and violence. And the temple of God had to be built in peace and purity. Therefore, all stone cutting was performed far away from the Temple Mount itself. Huge limestone blocks were precisely measured and carved inside distant quarries. Once finished, they were transported to Jerusalem. And when they arrived, the stones simply fit together like enormous puzzle pieces. No cutting, no chiseling, no hammering. Many archaeologists today believe that ancient sites known as Solomon's quarries were used to prepare these stones. The craftsmanship was so precise that some of those stone structures remain tightly fitted even after thousands of years. It was a remarkable engineering achievement of the ancient world. After 7 years of relentless work, the greatest temple in Israel's history was finally completed. The dedication ceremony became one of the most sacred events the nation had ever witnessed. The Ark of the Covenant, the holiest symbol of Israel's faith, was carried into the center of the temple. According to Scripture, when the Ark was placed inside the Holy of Holies, a thick cloud, the visible presence of God known as Shekinah, filled the entire sanctuary. The priests could not remain standing. They fell to the ground in awe. 183,000 workers, 7 years of construction, thousands of tons of gold and precious materials. Together, they had created one of the greatest monuments of faith in human history. But the price had been immense. Solomon eventually fell into heavy debt. To repay King Hiram, he was forced to hand over 20 cities in the region of Galilee. For 373 years, the magnificent temple stood at the heart of Jerusalem, until one fateful day. In 586 BCE, the Babylonian army invaded the city. Jerusalem was devastated, and the Temple of Solomon, the most expensive structure of the ancient world, was burned to the ground. What remained were only legends, fragments of stone, and a question that has echoed through history for thousands of years. Did the temple truly disappear forever? Or do its secrets still lie buried somewhere beneath the ancient city of Jerusalem?